Apocalyptic Super Farm. Chapter 41-50. Chapter 41. How can you eat such a cute bunny? Hiroshi stared at the words on the screen, feeling a sense of shock. This wasn't some secret of the Stardust Corporation. It was the ambition of a mad scientist. Faced with this upheaval, there were actually people like Christopher who wanted to change the entire world through their own efforts. Hiroshi couldn't help but admire him. But that admiration only went so far. If Christopher tried anything against him or Kiko, Hiroshi wouldn't hesitate to eliminate him, no matter how influential Christopher might be. Hiroshi scrolled down, seeing nothing but highly professional experimental data. It was clear that Christopher used his own specialized code when recording these data. Although Hiroshi had some knowledge of biology, he couldn't decipher what Christopher's data really meant. This thing is useless. Hiroshi finally confirmed that the USB drive he had snatched back was of no use to him. Disappointed, he unplugged it. After freshening up, he prepared to sleep. Meanwhile, inside Sally's villa, Christopher stared intently at his laptop, where the screen displayed a scanning interface resembling a defense radar. "Mr. Christopher, still no trace?" Eddie asked in a deep voice. Christopher loosened his collar impatiently, a helpless expression on his face. Perhaps they used some method, or maybe they haven't checked the contents of the USB yet. No signal. Should we report to the police and investigate? Eddie asked tentatively. Christopher pondered for a long while, shaking his head as if hesitating. Forget it. The data in that USB is just some old stuff. Even if someone else sees it, they probably won't understand. In fact, the information in that USB wasn't particularly important to him. It just contained some of his writings. If certain people saw it, they might guess his true purpose in coming to South City. "Mr. Christopher, this incident is too coincidental. We were attacked shortly after arriving in South City. Could it be the work of Number 7's people?" Eddie frowned, beginning to suspect that the attack on the villa tonight wasn't aimed at Sally, but at them. Christopher denied Eddie's speculation. Number 7 wouldn't send novices like this to attack us if they were really going to act against us. This person is physically strong but inexperienced, definitely not a professional thug. Could it really be a coincidence? Eddie muttered to himself. "Your anti-radiation corn has matured. Hiroshi was awakened by a series of alerts. He opened his eyes and glanced at the clock on the wall. 7 in the morning. He stretched lazily, feeling refreshed all over. Time to get up and make breakfast. Since his physique had improved, Hiroshi found that the quality of his sleep had also improved a lot. After 7 hours of sleep each day, he woke up feeling refreshed, with all the energy he had used during the day replenished in his sleep. 5 minutes later, a pot of millet porridge was already simmering in the kitchen. During this time, Hiroshi directed robots to harvest the mature crops. "You've exchanged 700 kilograms of corn, earning points. You've exchanged 600 kilograms of soybeans, earning points." Soon, the points were exchanged. Hiroshi glanced at the freezer and found that there were not many ingredients left. If they didn't replenish them tonight, they might end up having a vegetarian dinner. During this time, both he and Kiko had developed a taste for meat. The texture and nutrition provided by meat surpassed vegetables and fruits. For Kiko, who was still growing, it was essential. It's time to start using the animal husbandry area. Hiroshi opened the store and examined the interface for Resource Class, Livestock Area Juveniles. Inside the store, these young animals were also divided into 5 levels, just like the crops. With the influence of the accelerated potion, Hiroshi's current crops could be harvested 3 times a day. Besides using them for his own consumption and points exchange, he could also set aside some for feeding these young animals. What should I raise? I haven't had chicken in a long time. Let's get a few chickens first, and tonight we can pick some goji berries and jujubes to stew chicken soup. Hiroshi muttered to himself, calculating the categories of juveniles he wanted to develop. "We've been eating too much pork lately, and fatty meat is too greasy, so let's not consider it for now. Lamb is nutritious and has a good taste. Let's get 2 lambs. Oh, and let's get some quail too. Quail eggs are delicious when pickled. Donkey meat hot pot is also very good. Try hot and cold, weather is just right. Hiroshi looked at the dazzling array and felt that he wanted to taste all the meats. However, after careful consideration, he first selected 4 juveniles: sheep, chicken, rabbit, and quail. He chose these 4 because they were small in size, occupied little space, had small appetites, and were easy to raise. Most importantly, there were no storage costs. For example, Hiroshi and Kiko could finish eating all the meat on an adult goat within 3 days, without affecting the taste due to the meat being stored for too long. Hiroshi bought 2 lambs, 4 chicks, 4 baby rabbits, and 10 quails in one go. In an instant, the whole room became lively like a market. These young animals seemed hungry, chirping and tweeting incessantly, making Kiko wake up from the noise. Rubbing her eyes, she came out and was stunned by what she saw. "Big brother, where did you get so many baby bunnies?" In the eyes of the little girl, there had always been only cute things. The best-looking baby rabbit was hugged by Kiko, while the 2 lambs and chicks were completely ignored, standing on the side with a look of grievance, constantly crying "ba-ba" and "chirp chirp," seeming to feel lost because they hadn't received Kiko's affection. Seeing this, Hiroshi sighed silently, thinking to himself, "Don't worry, when you guys are placed on the dinner table, Kiko will surely show you even more love." "Little bunny is so pretty. I'm going to dress you up," Kiko said, then turned and ran to her bedroom with the small rabbit in her arms. Hiroshi didn't chase after her. Instead, he took the other juveniles downstairs with Little Black and placed them in the refurbished livestock shed. Since the advent of the destruction era, the weather had turned cold, so Hiroshi had added 2 layers of windproof cotton to the livestock shed. Moreover, he installed a special high-power heating air conditioner, so there was no risk of the juveniles freezing to death. After settling them, Hiroshi returned to the small building. He saw Kiko having painted a small rabbit in various colors with watercolor pens, looking very happy. "Kiko, after breakfast, you have to study, okay? Take the small rabbit to the shed downstairs," Hiroshi said. "No, I want the small rabbit to play with me," Kiko said, staring at the small rabbit without turning her eyes away. Hiroshi smiled and said, "But the small rabbit needs to grow quickly so it can grow meat." Suddenly realizing something, Kiko asked in surprise, "Big brother, are you going to eat the small rabbit? Otherwise, why would I raise it?" Hiroshi shrugged and turned to walk towards the kitchen. "Tonight we'll have chicken soup and spicy rabbit head. How does that sound? Plus a bit of scallion. It'll be delicious." Suddenly, with an extremely angry voice, Kiko shouted, "Big brother is a bad person. How can you eat such a cute bunny?" Hiroshi raised his eyebrows helplessly. This little foodie had quite the temper. "I hope that tonight, you won't be holding a rabbit leg in each hand, exclaiming how delicious it is." Chapter 42. Offspring. Breakfast was simple: millet porridge with radish meat buns, accompanied by some pickled green vegetables. Hiroshi made the buns himself. Although they weren't the prettiest, they tasted delicious. Filled generously with meat, each bite was dripping with savory juices that could make one's teeth melt. Together with his sister and Benji, they managed to devour an entire steamer of meat buns within 10 minutes. Afterward, each had 2 bowls of porridge before patting their full stomachs and leaving the dining table. After breakfast, Hiroshi placed Kiko's textbooks on the table and set her study time. Then, with Benji in tow, he left the small building. Despite the enormous changes in the world, Hiroshi hadn't given up on Kiko's education. Knowledge was always valuable, no matter the era. He didn't want Kiko to grow up ignorant. The growth time of level 2 livestock offspring is the same as crops, 72 hours, and they are completely immune to radiation poisoning. Hiroshi squatted in the livestock shed, smiling as he looked at the young livestock. LV2 cockroach poultry. Length of life, 1%. Growth status, good. Mature, 72 hours. Description: it's still very weak now and needs careful care from the owner. It requires 300 grams of soybeans, wheat grains, and vegetable supplements daily, but don't worry too much about the initial investment and don't be too eager. When the flesh is fully mature, you will get the most delicious enjoyment. Hiroshi was somewhat surprised after reading this introduction. These introductions were really considerate. Was this mocking him? These introductions made him look like a veteran foodie. Was it afraid that he would eat it early? The system will accurately warn or explain according to the host's personality, so please do not doubt. At this moment, the system's cold prompt sounded. Hiroshi was startled, and then murmured a bit. It seemed that the system could read his mind. But thinking carefully about the prompt of the system, he and Han seemed to be really senior foodies, and for them, there seemed to be nothing more important in their lives than eating. And they cut meat today. If these young livestock did not fully mature by the night, maybe Hiroshi really wanted to kill them in advance. After all, livestock is different from crops. Even if it is not fully matured, it is just a little less meat. Well, system, I'll forgive you for now, Hiroshi muttered nervously. Don't read my mind easily in the future. As an auxiliary system, understanding the host's thoughts is one of the principles that must be implemented by the system. The system's voice came again. Does that mean I'll be monitored silently if I kill something private in the future? Hiroshi suddenly became angry. With this thing, does that mean I have to be monitored silently even if I have something to do with women in the future? The system was silent for a long time and replied, the system is not interested in the human reproductive process. If the host needs to study, the system can provide a variety of learning videos for free, including Japanese, Korean, European, American. Stop it. Stop. Hiroshi directly interrupted the voice of the system, murmured, if you talk about it again, I'm afraid I won't pass. The system is absolutely safe, reliable, and green, in line with the three representatives. The system responded again with a cold voice. Hiroshi ignored it and turned to look at his points. 580,000. He quickly moved to the section of the backpack items. Crop accelerator, 21 liters remaining. Animal accelerator, 80 liters remaining. He took out about a liter of animal accelerator and mixed it with some feed, and Hiroshi fed the food for these offspring for the first time. The effect was very obvious. The two little lambs ate the food in the food trough, and the two swellings on their foreheads became visible to the naked eye. Soon, two small horns grew out. The changes in those little chicks were equally obvious. After eating, their bodies swelled up a circle, and the comb on top of their heads also turned bright red. If this continues, we can drink chicken soup tonight. Hiroshi was extremely pleased, touching the two little chicks with uncomfortable gaze in his eyes. You can cook a soup, then stew it, and then make some Coca-Cola chicken wings. I almost forgot. Kiko loves to eat spicy chicken pieces. The chicks hadn't grown up yet, and Hiroshi, this devil, had already started planning how to cook them. The two little lambs next to him seemed to feel the killing intent of the food in Hiroshi's eyes and suddenly retreated 2 steps. I won't play with you for the time being. Hiroshi smiled and stood up to stretch. Today, I have to continue to dig the fish pond. Within 5 days, I have to complete the fish pond. Hiroshi got up and walked away. But at this moment, he suddenly heard a pleasant prompt sound. Congratulations, the planting area has produced a rare product, albino corn. Please harvest it as soon as possible. Hiroshi was stunned. He turned to look at the planting area. Rare product? Albino corn? What is this again? Chapter 43, Rare Item. Albino corn. Rare item. Description. A highly rare mutated product, originating from radiation-resistant level corn, with a probability of 1 in 100,000. Category. LV2 disposable consumable. Function. Induces a berserk state in the consumer, enhancing human strength, speed, and neural reaction speed tenfold for 30 seconds. Supplementary explanation. This item can only provide its effects to one consumer. Once activated, the berserk effect cannot be obtained by a second consumer. Hiroshi stood in the planting area, looking at the miniature albino corn the size of his little finger, his mind momentarily blank. This corn was markedly different from others in appearance, emitting a faint white light. Even the data description was in a row of purple font. At a glance, it was fundamentally different from the ordinary white font of regular crops. Berserk, tenfold physical enhancement for 30 seconds. Hiroshi's eyes trembled as he stared at the pale white corn stalk. This effect was simply earth-shattering. For a world-class athlete, their speed and strength might be at most 2 to 3 times that of an ordinary person, which was already considered the limit for human capability. Even highly trained special forces or assassins wouldn't exceed this data by much. 3.5 times was already considered the highest. Don't underestimate this 3.5 times. The difference was enough to allow top-tier assassins to escape from dozens, even hundreds, of people's encirclements. What did 10 times mean? Super Saiyan, Hulk, Saint Seiya with an erupting cosmos. In short, it could be said that there would be no opponent on the entire planet. Even firearms might struggle to compete. Catching bullets barehanded was not impossible. This is basically Popeye's spinach. Hiroshi rubbed his hands excitedly, swiftly storing it in his system's backpack to carry with him. This was too rare and valuable. If used properly, its effects would be astonishing. Maybe it could change the outcome of a small-scale battle. After harvesting, Hiroshi continued to wander around the farming area for a long time but found no similar rare items produced, feeling somewhat disappointed and sighing. It seems that such rare items are really like finding a needle in a haystack, only produced when luck is on your side. Hiroshi licked his lips, but through this incident, he once again understood that some functions of the farm needed to be explored by himself. Like this albino corn, there was absolutely no mention of it from the system during sowing. Could this be a pleasant surprise? Hiroshi smiled and then felt his enthusiasm strengthen even more. 1 in 100,000 probability means that as long as I keep planting and harvesting, rare items will be produced again with each planting cycle. Someday, I will have a large quantity of rare items. Although the probability of 1 in 100,000 seemed small, a rough calculation showed that it wasn't actually low. Hiroshi needed to plant over 3,000 corn seeds per acre. Dividing 100,000 by 3,000, Hiroshi needed to plant over 30 times to get one rare item. It seems necessary to cultivate some densely planted crops, such as wheat and rice. They require planting at least tens of thousands per acre. If I increase their density by half, the probability of producing rare items will be much higher than corn, right? Hiroshi thought gleefully, suddenly startled by his own thoughts, muttering incomprehensibly. Wouldn't this be considered exploiting a bug? No. Isn't this putting the cart before the horse? Increasing planting density will indeed increase the probability of producing rare items, but it will also reduce the quality and yield of crops. What I need most right now is still points. The function of rare items can only be the icing on the cake. Hiroshi forced himself to stabilize his mood and then reaffirmed his path. He shouldn't chase after the probabilistic rare items, but focus on sustainable development of crops to exchange for points. Rumble. The roar of the excavator echoed through the farm. Hiroshi had been digging the fish pond for 2 days now, and by this time, he had completed half of the planned pond area. Much faster progress than he had imagined. Just then, Hiroshi's phone rang. He glanced down and saw it was from Jimmy, smiling as he answered, "Jimmy? Rent. All right, I'll bring it to the farm gate right away." Sure enough, Jimmy was here for today's rent. Hiroshi jumped down from the excavator and glanced at the livestock shed as he passed by. 3 hours had passed, and the growth rate of those offspring had far exceeded his expectations. Their bodies had grown 2 to 3 times larger. The 2 little lambs were almost reaching Hiroshi's thigh, estimated to weigh over 40 pounds each. By 4 or 5 in the afternoon, these offspring would be fully mature, and by nightfall, they could enjoy hot pot lamb and chicken soup again. Thinking of this, Hiroshi wiped the drool involuntarily dripping from the corner of his mouth and walked briskly toward the farm gate. Through the gap in the iron railing, he handed over the frozen meat and flour. Jimmy took them, glanced around cautiously, then carefully placed them in an opaque cloth bag and zipped it up. At the same time, Hiroshi noticed that Jimmy seemed to be carrying a shining cold long knife in his arms. "Jimmy, you seem to be well prepared." Hiroshi pointed to Jimmy's arms and said with a smile, "I have to be well prepared." Jimmy sighed and said, "Someone was robbed again yesterday. It's said to be those grain-stealing gangs, and it even caused casualties." Hiroshi was stunned at the news, frowning. It seemed like those grain-stealing gangs were becoming more and more brazen. This was not good news for him, as his farm was a likely target for suspicion of having food storage. Once targeted by those grain-stealing gangs, he would be in trouble. Are the military and police still not responding? Hiroshi asked. Don't mention it. Jimmy seemed extremely angry, gritting his teeth. I heard there might be a war. The European Union has been rubbing against our federation for a long time. Taking advantage of this mutation, they're deploying troops on the border, showing some malicious intent. Since last night, the central government has been mobilizing to the border, and large numbers of military and police forces have been deployed. I saw hundreds of trucks transporting troops leaving the city center, heading south. Chapter 44. Gathering Hands. Upon hearing this, Hiroshi's mood turned heavy. Ever since the establishment of the Federation, the Dragon Federation, its rapid development had secured a significant international standing. With the rise of a major power, inevitably came the competition for resources, and as the Federation grew, it naturally encroached on interests that once belonged to other nations. For this reason, the European Union, bearing the banner of the bald eagle, viewed the Dragon Federation as a thorn in its side, an eyesore. Over the past few decades, the European Union had used various despicable methods to hinder the Dragon Federation's development, resorting to all possible means, which was infuriating and shameless to the extreme. However, over the years, the European Union had only dared to impose technological or commercial blockades against the Federation, never daring to provoke a real conflict or war. Everyone understood that a war between two powerful nations would lead to consequences no one could bear. But this world upheaval had driven the European Union completely mad. The Federation was an agricultural powerhouse with vast territory, surpassing the European Union by far in terms of grain production and storage. To put it bluntly, in such a harsh environment, the Federation could still sustain itself for decades with its stored grains and soil-less cultivation techniques, while the European Union could not. Some had speculated that the European Union would exhaust its grain reserves within 3 months, and the first batch of soil-less cultivated grains wouldn't mature in time either. In other words, 3 months later, the European Union would face a situation where a large number of people would starve. To stabilize the situation, they would have no choice but to import food from other countries. However, in this current world upheaval, which country would have surplus food to export to the infamous European Union? Contemplating this consequence, the leader of the European Union, Whitestone, was in a panic. So, yesterday afternoon, the European Union mobilized tens of thousands of troops, an aircraft carrier, 10 fleets, and hundreds of destroyers, all openly coming near the South Sea, clearly indicating their readiness for war. Although Whitestone's intention might not have been to provoke an actual war, but rather to use military intimidation to pave the way for future grain imports from the Dragon Federation, how could the Dragon Federation's central government yield on matters of national dignity? Haven't you seen the Great Wall of Steel stretching for thousands of miles, forged from the unyielding iron bones of countless soldiers? In matters of national dignity, over the millennia, the ancestors of the Dragon Federation had never bowed to any fierce enemy. In response to the European Union's provocation, the Dragon Federation's central government's reaction was swift and decisive, without diplomatic negotiations, without condemnation, immediately mobilizing 100,000 soldiers from the 3 major military districts to rush to the coastline. Damn it! Those grain raiders should all be shot. With a war about to break out on the border, they're still causing internal chaos. They're a bunch of damn scoundrels. Jimmy gritted his teeth and cursed. It's just that I don't have any weapons. If I did, I'd really want to fight them. Hearing this, Hiroshi's heart felt heavy. Since many of the South City's military and police forces had been deployed elsewhere, his farm might be vulnerable if those raiders set their sights on it. Although he had ample defenses within the farm, a large enough group could overrun the gates easily. Thinking of this, Hiroshi asked, Jimmy, have you seen these raiders? Jimmy's eyes reddened with anger. He spat out, I haven't seen them myself, but they raided my younger brother's restaurant. All the food in the cold storage was taken. There were about 30 or 40 of them, all big and strong, not a single one over 40. My younger brother got shot, and he's in the hospital ICU now. Hiroshi now had a basic understanding of these grain raiders, who had been recently causing havoc in the area. 30 to 40 strong men, armed with a dozen or so homemade shotguns, could easily establish themselves as local bandits in any other time. These people don't dare to enter the urban areas. They're just prowling around the nearby towns. They've raided dozens of supermarkets, grain stations, and restaurants. Jimmy became increasingly agitated as he spoke, unable to hold back his disgust. They're a bunch of scoundrels. One day, they'll get what's coming to them. Jimmy, why do you place your hopes on others? Hiroshi suddenly spoke up, staring seriously at Jimmy's face. Why can't we solve this problem ourselves? Jimmy was stunned, as if he had heard something unimaginable. His expression was one of disbelief, stammering, "You? What did you say?" I said, "How about we take care of these raiders ourselves?" Hiroshi's tone was grave, enunciating each word. I do want to get rid of them, but... Jimmy's deep-seated fear prevented his thoughts from changing so quickly. Hearing Hiroshi's suggestion, he instinctively felt fear. It's just the two of us against so many people, and they have guns. The issue of weapons, I'll handle. Hiroshi spoke softly. As for your concern about persuading people, don't worry. Jimmy fell into thought. Now, he no longer felt the initial panic. Upon careful consideration, Hiroshi's suggestion resonated deeply with him. But Jimmy looked at Hiroshi awkwardly and said, "Those who have been raided by them are all scared. I'm afraid it's hard to convince them with just words." Hiroshi smiled faintly at this reaction. "Are you worried about the issue of weapons? You think you won't convince them just by talking?" Jimmy smiled somewhat embarrassedly. Indeed, that was the case. In this post-apocalyptic world, facing an armed group with shotguns, if one lacked the confidence and strength, 99% of people wouldn't agree to Hiroshi's proposal. "You don't need to worry about that," Hiroshi said after a moment of silence. From his pocket, he pulled out a revolver and casually waved it in front of Jimmy. Then he aimed at a distant iron barrel and pulled the trigger. After a deafening sound, 2 holes pierced through the iron barrel. Jimmy was dumbfounded. How do you have a gun?" Jimmy stammered. "Who doesn't have a few secrets?" Hiroshi didn't elaborate. Instead, he reholstered the revolver and said, "Jimmy, go ahead and gather people. Tell them that as long as they have the courage for revenge, I'll make sure they won't be at a disadvantage in terms of weapons." Chapter 45. Full River Red. Jimmy left in a hurry, and as he departed, Hiroshi clearly saw that Jimmy's legs were trembling. Hiroshi smiled, turned around, and headed back towards the fish pond. He wasn't worried that Jimmy would betray or report him. Clearly, the benefits Jimmy gained from cooperating with him outweighed any other considerations. He could help his own younger brother seek revenge and take away the grain looted by those bandits as spoils of war. 2 birds with 1 stone. Only a fool would pass up such benefits to report Hiroshi for illegal possession of firearms. Busy times always passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Hiroshi arrived at the livestock shed and found that the young animals had all matured completely. They looked fat and healthy, with glossy fur compared to ordinary livestock. They finally matured before dinner. Hiroshi gleefully picked up 2 fat chickens and said, "You guys have bad luck tonight because I feel like having chicken soup." As if anticipating the crisis, the 2 fat chickens struggled desperately. But Hiroshi carried them to the water pipe, and with a swift motion, he ended their short lives. Next, Hiroshi skillfully bled them, plucked their feathers, cleaned out their innards, and once both chickens were cleaned, he stepped into the kitchen and placed a sand pot, which hadn't been used for a long time, on the stove. "Big brother, how about chicken soup tonight?" Kiko trotted over, her eyes sparkling. "Do you like it?" Hiroshi skillfully added water to the sand pot. Once it boiled, he added shredded ginger and scallions, and finally, the cleaned whole chickens before covering it. Kiko nodded vigorously. "And add some mushrooms. It'll taste even better." "I almost forgot." Hiroshi slapped his forehead. Chicken soup with mushrooms is indeed a perfect match. With that, Hiroshi took out a few mushrooms, washed them, and waited until the chicken was thoroughly cooked before adding them. Everything was ready. Hiroshi sat on the sofa, turned on the TV, and prepared to watch the news. Kiko also came over and nestled into Hiroshi's embrace. "Kiko, what did you learn today?" Hiroshi tousled Kiko's hair and asked with a smile. "A lot. There was math, ancient poetry, moral education." Kiko counted on her fingers, saying, "But I liked the ancient poems the most. I really liked Chinese class." "You enjoy reciting poems?" Hiroshi pretended to be surprised, then smiled and said, "How about reciting one for me?" "Okay." Kiko nodded crisply. At the same time, the TV began broadcasting the news. As Hiroshi expected, the news at this moment was exclusively about the illegal harassment of the Dragon Federation's borders by the EU fleet. The screen showed a vast expanse of sea. EU fleets, flying the flag of the White Eagle, were arrayed in the picture. The soldiers with blonde hair and blue eyes stared at the Dragon Federation's warships with fierce determination. The cannons of those warships gleamed brightly, and EU fighter jets circled in the sky, seemingly exerting pressure on the Dragon Federation. On the screen, the host said, "As of 5:20 this afternoon, the EU has not withdrawn its fleet, which has illegally harassed our federal waters. So far, the federal government has mobilized more than 20 divisions, including the 3rd and 4th Army Groups, to deploy along the coastline. General Hawk of the 3rd Army Group will meet with EU representatives tonight to resolve this issue peacefully. However, we are also prepared to face any outcome. As always, the Dragon Federation will not initiate war with any country, but we will never fear war with any country." The host's passionate voice came through the TV. The scene shifted to the Dragon Federation's armored warships and their orderly military formation, resembling the backbone supporting the nation. At the same time, Kiko's ethereal voice rang out. "Furiously brushing off my hat, I stand by the rail, the drizzle having just stopped." It was Yufei's full river red, perfectly matching the current TV scene. The sky on the border was gloomy, as if a torrential rain was about to pour down. Yet the faces of those soldiers remained resolute, glaring angrily at the enemy. Lifting my eyes, I howl at the sky, my spirit fierce. 30 feet and names lie in dust, 8,000 miles of clouds and moon. Do not wait idly by, my head grown white in youth, empty sorrow. These soldiers now on the border, they rushed from the Federation's territory to the border, covered in dust and grime. Not just 8,000 miles? Perhaps they hadn't rested all night. Their bodies may now be tired, but their spirits were extremely high. To be a soldier, what is it for? Isn't it to protect the country, to gain fame before and after death? These soldiers, they train day and night, never relaxed. They won't be empty sorrowful, because they have an extremely heavy mission on their shoulders. On the TV screen, the EU spokesperson's incessant remarks were filled with threats, from chip blockades to oil cooperation, repeating over and over again, expressing only one central idea: if the China did not acknowledge union would accept even further. Hearing these words, the eyes of the border warriors blazed with fury. They wished they could raise their guns right then and there and unleash their wrath on those shameless faces across the line. Ever since the Federation was founded 80 years ago, it had been relentlessly suppressed by the European Union. Once, a Federation weapons expert wanted to return to his homeland, but the EU obstructed him at every turn, even resorting to assassination attempts. They were determined to prevent him from returning to the Federation, even if it meant his death. It took the lives of nearly 1,000 brave soldiers for the Federation to finally protect this expert and bring him back home. Such incidents were numerous and well-known worldwide. The EU feared the Federation's rise, terrified of the Federation's potential. This was the humiliation that once belonged to the Dragon Federation. Strongly we crave to feast on barbarian flesh, Hiroshi softly recited alongside Henin, feeling a growing fire in his chest that he could hardly contain. At the same time, General Hawk, representing the Dragon Federation army, stepped onto the stage. He calmly glanced at the EU representatives and began, "I heard Mr. Charles say a lot just now. I think much of it made sense. My response is simple, just 2 or 3 sentences. Thirstily we drink the blood of the Huns, Hiroshi murmured, eyes fixed on the TV screen. The Federation today is not the Federation of 80 years ago, General Hawk said, staring directly at Charles. If you want a fight, then a fight it shall be. Simultaneously on the coastline, 100,000 soldiers shouted in unison, their voices reaching the skies. If you want a fight, then a fight it shall be. Let us recover our lost mountains and rivers and make our way to the heavenly palace. Hiroshi stood up, his gaze firm and resolute. Charles was stunned. At that moment, the whole world erupted. Chapter 46. The Plan. No one expected the Dragon Federation's response to be so resolute, because the Federation was now facing the world's #1 superpower. Simultaneously, this news was blowing up across the internet. Doyo user, no regrets in this life, entering Huaxia, in the next life, I'll still be born in a flower-planting family. Slowhand user, the Federation is no longer the Federation that everyone can step on. Iceberg short video, no one can arbitrarily bully our dignity. Shrimp user, as soon as Whitestone took office, such a big thing happened. Obviously not a whim. According to my analysis, this is a premeditated conspiracy. Imperialism's desire to destroy us is unending. Maybe even this global anomaly is a collaboration between Whitestone and aliens. The user is suspected of spreading superstition and false information. The account has been banned from posting. Oh damn. The speed of banning accounts into the blacklist is getting faster and faster. Emotions were running high on the internet, opinions flooding in from all sides. But regardless of the platform or the speaker, the central theme of their expressions was remarkably unified. Just like General Hawk's statement, not a single inch of land will be given up, no negotiations refused. If you want war, then war it shall be. The high-spirited will of the Dragon Federation's entire nation mobilizing for war spread through the internet and reached the European Union delegation. On the coastline, the EU delegation led by Charles hesitated. Even as powerful as the European Union was, they did not dare to rashly declare war on the Dragon Federation. As some netizens put it, the Dragon Federation was no longer the weak country that everyone could bully in the past. After a quick discussion, Charles spoke, requesting General Hawk to give him some time. Within 24 hours, he would report to the EU Parliament and await their instructions. But General Hawk showed no mercy and issued an ultimatum. If within 10 minutes any EU warship remained in the Dragon Federation waters, the Dragon Federation's nuclear submarines would launch a devastating strike against the EU fleet until the last invader was eliminated. As if to confirm General Hawk's words, near the EU fleet, the sea churned violently, several the Dragon Federation-flagged nuclear submarines surfaced, their gun barrels cold and already aimed at the EU ships. This was the Dragon Federation's waters, where its military power far surpassed that of the EU. If they truly engaged in combat, the outcome would be beyond doubt. Within 10 minutes at most, the EU fleet would be completely annihilated. Leading his fleet to the Dragon Federation's waters was originally intended as a demonstration for Charles, but now, it was clear his objective could no longer be achieved. After about 3 minutes of emergency deliberation, under the gaze of the entire world, the EU reluctantly chose to compromise. 10 minutes later, those ships bearing the Eagle flag slinked out of the Dragon Federation's waters, leaving only a few disheveled silhouettes. At this moment, the whole country erupted in cheers. Hiroshi, sitting in front of the television, also breathed a sigh of relief. No one liked war. Although the Dragon Federation soldiers were not afraid of war, they were not violent maniacs either. Peace was what everyone desired. It seems like the world is really about to change. Hiroshi took a deep breath. Although this incident was resolved peacefully this time, there would come a day when war would truly break out. That was an inevitable fact. As food resources continued to dwindle, the world's superpowers would inevitably wage war to eliminate others and seize their survival resources. Just like the marauding food bandits roaming the town now, their nature was essentially the same. Food supplies have not been fully depleted so far, and major countries still have military food reserves. But if the second cataclysm arrives 20 days later, and the rivers and lakes disappear from Earth, that will be the most disastrous. Hiroshi frowned. Industries powered by hydropower are too many. Electricity generation, transportation, military. Once hydropower is gone, all of these will be affected. By then, perhaps the European Union, backed by the resources of the Pacific, will go completely insane within 3 months, bankrupting a large number of industries and behaving like a rabid dog biting randomly around the world. Hiroshi pondered this issue seriously. He felt it necessary to prepare in advance for this matter. But right now, he should be considering another issue. Although the European Union failed at the border, the Dragon Federation would definitely increase its border defenses from now on. Just now, General Hawk also declared on television that, in the short term, the military and police mobilized from all over would not leave the coastline. This decision not only deterred the European Union, but also meant that the number of military and police officers in urban areas would decrease, and the level of control would not be as strong as before. Just like in South City now. With a population of 400,000, the city originally had 3,000 military and police officers. But since last night's mobilization, there were now fewer than 500 military and police officers in the entire South City. And this situation would probably continue for a long time. With fewer military and police control, those demons and monsters lurking among the people would probably start causing trouble. In the coming period, South City would face its most chaotic times. He should first deal with the group of food bandits currently roaming in South City. I wonder how Jimmy is progressing with gathering people. If it weren't for the astonishing combat skills of level 2 or above battle warriors being too eye-catching, Hiroshi wouldn't want to expose his cards so early. With just those 5 adult-level battle warriors, if they ambushed properly, there was a 50% chance they could wipe out those tough bandits. But Hiroshi didn't want to bet on that 50% chance. The danger posed by the bandits to the residents of the town wasn't just about him. So he didn't want to take on the entire danger for everyone as an anonymous hero. Moreover, Hiroshi also wanted to use this matter to establish his prestige in town. At this moment, the aroma of meat drifted in from the kitchen. The chicken had been stewing for half an hour, and its unique aroma was beginning to permeate. Wow, it smells so good. 2 hours later, the chicken was fully stewed. Hiroshi carried the clay pot to the dining table, lifted the lid, and an extremely rich aroma instantly filled the room. The chicken soup had a golden sheen, with shiitake mushrooms, wolfberries, and cut pieces of corn floating on top. Hiroshi scooped up a spoonful of soup and tasted it. Instantly, his taste buds exploded as the flavors of various ingredients mixed together, creating an unparalleled delicacy. Hiroshi was willing to bet that this was the most delicious chicken soup he had ever tasted in his life. A pot of delicious chicken soup. Ingredients: level 2 chicken meat, level 2 corn, shiitake mushrooms, wolfberries. Taste: 4. After consumption: +5 stamina, +5 satiety. Physique optimization: removes negative statuses, hunger, and cold. Explanation: its aroma surpasses all foods you've ever eaten. Superior ingredients combined with skillful cooking techniques make it a perfect match. Kiko was holding her small bowl in her left hand and a small spoon in her right, eagerly waiting at the dining table, drooling. This scene made Hiroshi recall a saying: "Eat your food, savor your soul. Those who dine are the best." Although it was a very common saying, it expressed humans' most essential needs and the most relaxing moments, which were meal times. Let's eat. With Hiroshi's command, the two of them treated the chicken soup on the table as if it were their enemy, starting the fiercest charge. "Big brother, have a chicken leg?" Kiko puffed up her cheeks, using her oily little hand to tear off a fragrant chicken leg and hand it to Hiroshi. "It smells so good. Eat more, don't worry about me." Hiroshi smiled indulgently, then patted Kiko's head. "I'll need your help later." Kiko blinked her eyes, not understanding. Hiroshi picked up a piece of chicken breast. Even though chicken breast was the most difficult to marinate due to its ingredients, it didn't have a dry or rough taste. On the contrary, it was tender and smooth. Paired with shiitake mushrooms, Hiroshi ate 2 large bowls in a row. Then he suddenly felt his phone vibrate. It was a text from Jimmy. "The people are all gathered now. I'm at my place. Are you coming over?" Hiroshi looked at the message, silent for a moment, then replied, "Okay." Chapter 47. Secret Meeting in the Warehouse. It was late, 9 o'clock. Inside Jimmy's temporary warehouse, the dim lights cast a shadow over the faces of more than 20 people gathered around a stove in the middle of the room, their expressions tense and anxious. Some smoked silently, not uttering a word. The atmosphere in the warehouse was extremely heavy. "Jimmy, when is this Hiroshi you mentioned going to arrive?" Finally, someone spoke up. "We've been waiting for him for nearly 2 hours now. Isn't he being a bit too arrogant?" "Yeah, just a little brat, barely grown up, and he thinks he can take on those crazy bandits. Isn't that just wishful thinking?" "Jimmy, we all came here because of you. This kid is really unreliable." Perhaps because they had waited too long, or because many of them had been robbed before, leaving them bitter and resentful, complaints began to surface. Some were even preparing to leave. "Let's give him a little more time. Boss Hiroshi's farm is quite far from here, especially at night. He might have been delayed on the way. Let's be patient." Jimmy wiped the sweat from his forehead, trying to calm everyone down. Since leaving Hiroshi's farm earlier that day, Jimmy had visited every town nearby. The gang that had been robbing food supplies had been particularly active recently, and it was easy to find out who the victims were. In the past 10 days, more than 50 households had fallen victim to this gang, mostly restaurants or supermarkets, their food supplies completely looted. A few unfortunate ones had been shot and wounded. 2 had bled to death on the way to the hospital without receiving treatment. Upon hearing about so many victims, Jimmy realized the situation was serious. He had thought it would be easy to gather enough people, but he was disappointed. When these victims heard Jimmy's intentions, some slammed their doors shut, while others cursed at him. Jimmy had almost gotten into a fight with them right then and there. Later, Jimmy understood. They were all terrified of these food-robbing gangs and dared not resist for fear of retaliation. So Jimmy spent the whole day in nearby towns before finally persuading these 24 people to come. Some of them were Jimmy's acquaintances who hadn't wanted to come but had to show up because of him. But now, after waiting for 2 hours and still no sign of Hiroshi, they could no longer contain their impatience. They began to shout that they were leaving, not willing to stay and watch Jimmy lose his mind. Even the military and police can't handle them. What can a little brat do? "I must be stupid for waiting here for 2 hours." A middle-aged man in his 40s sneered and glared at the others. "If you still want to waste time, go ahead. I'm not playing along anymore. I'm going home. I knew from the start this was a bad idea. Let's go, let's go." Led by the middle-aged man, the 20 in the warehouse started to get up, preparing to leave. Just then, the sound of a motorcycle approached outside the warehouse. Soon after, the warehouse door was pushed open from the outside. A young man walked in, leading a delicate and pretty young girl. He looked around and smiled. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Hiroshi. It was me who asked Jimmy to gather you all here tonight." Those who were about to step out of the warehouse froze at his words, their eyes fixed on Hiroshi. "You're the one who said you can lead us to get revenge?" The middle-aged man frowned and asked, "What makes us believe in you?" When Jimmy had approached them earlier, he hadn't mentioned that Hiroshi was armed. After all, with so many people involved, there was a risk of the information leaking prematurely. "Yeah, what makes you think we should trust you? With your small arms and legs, you'll probably collapse with a gust of wind blowing on you, won't you? You can't even handle me. How are you going to deal with those thugs who are armed?" For a moment, tension rose sharply in the warehouse, and everyone began to question Hiroshi directly. Hiroshi took a deep breath, glanced at everyone, and suddenly smiled. "What makes you believe? How about this?" Hiroshi suddenly lifted his leg and kicked a stone millstone that was placed near the warehouse door. With a loud bang, the 8-kilogram millstone was kicked 3 meters away by Hiroshi, landing heavily on the ground and cracking in the middle. Silence. The warehouse fell into silence. Everyone who witnessed this scene was stunned. Even Jimmy was on the verge of popping his eyeballs out. Jimmy knew very well how heavy that millstone was. Even moving it a little required him to exert all his strength. But Hiroshi just kicked it away like it was nothing, and even cracked it. Most importantly, his expression didn't even suggest he had exerted much effort. My God, what is Hiroshi made of? Steel? For a long time, the warehouse was silent. Only the sound of swallowing saliva could be heard. After a while, someone tremblingly asked, Mr. Hiroshi, I admit you're indeed strong, but those guys have guns. Even if you're so powerful, can you withstand firearms? At these words, the morale that had risen due to Hiroshi's display of terrifying strength began to sink again. This was an era of technology. Even the world's top martial artists couldn't withstand an attack from an ordinary person with a gun. Are you talking about these guns? Hiroshi spoke, and suddenly a thunderous sound like an explosion rang out in the warehouse. In the distance, a bucket shattered. In Hiroshi's hand, a revolver was still emitting wisps of white smoke. At this moment, no one doubted Hiroshi's strength anymore. With such formidable skills and state-of-the-art weapons, Hiroshi was definitely qualified to take down those thugs. The chaos that had been brewing in the warehouse before Hiroshi arrived was resolved in less than a minute after he showed up. Mr. Hiroshi, those are a group of thugs. What if we get injured or killed in the fight? Someone asked with concern. Hiroshi frowned at the question, then looked around and said in a deep voice, After your food supplies are looted, how long can you hold on? Between starving to death and fighting to the death, which one do you choose? To fight to the death meant there was still a chance of survival. To be timid meant a certain death. Silence fell among the crowd. After a long silence, someone finally gritted their teeth and said, All right, count me in. These bastards stole all my savings and seriously injured my father. If I don't get revenge, I'm not a man. I'm in too. Count me in. These people are like locusts that can never be satisfied. They've taken away our food, our hope of survival. We must get revenge and reclaim what is rightfully ours. Seeing this scene, Hiroshi smiled faintly. Good. But to succeed, you must all follow my plan. Before we start the plan, I'll ask again. Anyone else wants to withdraw? If so, speak up now. Once the plan starts, if you don't follow orders or retreat midway, don't blame me for turning hostile. Chapter 48. Blood Red. Just a moment ago, Hiroshi had demonstrated extraordinary personal strength, which immediately subdued everyone present. Coupled with their deep-seated hatred towards the grain robbers who had plundered them before, they all nodded vigorously and said, Boss Hiroshi, whatever you say, we'll do. From now on, you're the leader of our Avengers Alliance. Yes, we'll follow your command. Just let us reclaim our stolen food, and we'll do anything. For a moment, the atmosphere in the warehouse was fervent. Seeing this, Hiroshi nodded satisfactorily. Jimmy also breathed a sigh of relief, secretly admiring how much Hiroshi had changed in just a few months. In his memory, Hiroshi was once a quiet and obedient boy, but now he had become an excellent commander capable of leading others. I'll send you the specific plan early tomorrow morning. Hiroshi glanced over the crowd. After you all go home, keep this matter to yourselves. Don't even tell your closest friends. If our plan leaks out, everything will be ruined. Everyone understood the importance of secrecy. It was a matter of life and death. The more than 20 people in the warehouse solemnly nodded, declaring that they would never reveal this even if it cost them their lives. All right, let's leave it at that for tonight. Everyone go home. Hiroshi squinted his eyes, surveying the group. Keep your phones on and ready. Tomorrow, we strike. People in the warehouse put on their coats and walked out. On the side, Jimmy watched and couldn't help but approach Hiroshi with excitement. Boss Hiroshi, you're amazing. Just now, these guys were clamoring to go home, but as soon as you arrived, you managed to get them all on board. Stop talking, Hiroshi suddenly interrupted Jimmy, speaking softly. Don't disturb Kiko. Jimmy was momentarily taken aback. He then looked down at Kiko, who had been standing quietly by Hiroshi's right hand. She blinked her big eyes, watching the departing figures. The third one, the bald old man in the green down jacket and windbreaker, His color is like blood red. Kiko blinked twice, withdrew her gaze and whispered, "Except for him, everyone else is in green." Uncle Jimmy, you're also in green." Upon hearing this, Jimmy almost exploded with anger on the spot. He recalled his wife who had run away with someone else 2 years ago, and now, hearing Kiko's remark about wearing green, it felt like a stab to his heart, almost bringing tears to his eyes. "Boss Hiroshi, what's your sister trying to imply? Is she bringing up my old wounds?" Jimmy shouted, his face flushed with a mix of sorrow and indignation. "You've misunderstood." Hiroshi patted Jimmy's shoulder, squinting as he said, "Green represents safety and peace. If your color wasn't green, I'm afraid you wouldn't be standing here talking to me right now." Seeing the hint of killing intent in Hiroshi's eyes, Jimmy couldn't help but shiver. Suddenly, he remembered Kiko's earlier words about someone wearing a color like blood red. What did that signify? Jerky-chan drove his small truck on the road back home, his speed fast, reflecting his anxious state of mind. Heh, bunch of idiots. They really think they can take on those thugs with just a few crappy guns? Those thugs have killed people. Jerky-chan sneered, muttering to himself, "I'm not risking my life with them." Indeed, just like the others in the warehouse a while ago, Jerky-chan had raised his hand and shouted to eliminate the thugs and reclaim his food. However, deep down, he didn't actually intend to do any such thing. He didn't dare to fight the thugs. But without fighting, how could he have money or food? It seemed like a deadlock. But this didn't bother Jerky-chan. He had a brilliant idea. When those grain robbers had left his house earlier, he had been cautious, noting the direction they took and eventually discovered their temporary hideout. He didn't dare to report them to the military or the police for fear of retaliation and a brutal massacre. But now, he had a plan. He intended to do something despicable, even shameful. He was going to inform those thugs of Hiroshi's plan tonight to gather people against them. By doing so, the thugs would surely consider him a great benefactor, maybe even return his stolen food and perhaps even offer him more. No need to risk my life, and I still get food. Only a fool would go fight those thugs. Jerky-chan smirked triumphantly. He had already noted down the names of the people in the warehouse, creating a memo on his phone for the thugs. "Sorry, folks. I'm using your lives to secure my fortune. Don't blame me. In this world, you have to look out for yourself, or else you're doomed." Jerky-chan's face twisted into a sinister smile. Just then, a large construction truck suddenly emerged from the intersection ahead, its headlights bright, heading straight towards Jerky-chan's truck. "Oh, f***!" Jerky-chan was momentarily stunned, then slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded forward for several meters before crashing head-on into the other vehicle. A loud crash echoed. Both vehicles came to a sudden halt. The glass of Jerky-chan's truck shattered instantly, his head hitting the steering wheel, leaving him dazed and confused. After a moment, Jerky-chan shook his head vigorously, feeling blood on his hand when he touched his forehead. This. Jerky-chan was furious. He casually brushed the broken glass off his body, then angrily pulled open the car door and jumped out, rushing to the door of the construction truck and banging on it forcefully. "Get the f*** out! Are you blind? How can you drive like that? Hurry up and open the door." Jerky-chan was about to explode with anger. At that moment, the door of the construction truck swung open, and Hiroshi stepped out expressionlessly from the driver's seat, holding a hollow steel pipe. He dragged it along the ground as he stepped forward, making a clanging sound. "I have a few questions for you, Jerky-chan." Hiroshi's mouth twisted into a cruel smile. He raised his hand, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. "I have a bad temper, so you better answer truthfully. Otherwise, the consequences will be severe." Chapter 49. Traitor. Looking at Hiroshi like this, Jerky-chan swallowed hard, feeling the tension creep up his legs, causing them to tremble slightly. Partly out of guilt, at this moment, Jerky-chan's legs were already beginning to shake. "Boss Hiroshi, you want to ask about those thugs, right? I just said it earlier. I'll definitely follow you to kill those bastards. I'll listen to your command." Jerky-chan frantically expressed his loyalty, using exaggerated gestures to conceal his fear. If you have any orders, just say it. I'm at your service. Hiroshi smiled upon hearing this. Jerky-chan was indeed a good actor. His performance was convincing. If it weren't for Kiko seeing the bloodstains on him, even Hiroshi might have been fooled. Very well. Hiroshi nodded, picking up the steel pipe and lightly tapping it on his shoulder. He fixed his gaze on Jerky-chan and said in a chilling tone, "Explain to me why you harbor such strong malice towards me and my sister?" Jerky-chan froze. Then, his expression changed quickly, waving his hands to deny. "Boss Hiroshi, where are you getting this from? You're leading us against formidable enemies. I'm grateful to you. How could I bear any ill will towards you? Who's spreading these damn lies? I swear I'll have nothing to do with them." Jerky-chan's face flushed red as he angrily roared, emotions perfectly in place. "Boss Hiroshi, it's our first meeting, and we had no prior grievances. I have no reason to hold any ill will towards you." Hiroshi chuckled at his response. Maybe there weren't any before, but perhaps after the meeting in the warehouse just now. Jerky-chan's face turned pale in an instant. He was caught off guard. He felt that Hiroshi had guessed his thoughts, leaving him at a loss for words. Seeing his reaction, Hiroshi's expression darkened. Just as Kiko's ability had foreseen, Jerky-chan wasn't as innocent as he seemed. "Speak. Tell me everything." Hiroshi stared expressionlessly at Jerky-chan. "If you confess now, I might consider letting you off." "Boss Hiroshi, I'm really innocent." Jerky-chan pretended to be pitiful. "My family was robbed clean by those thugs. You're like a savior to me. How could I betray you? It's those damn thugs who slandered me. I won't let them off." Jerky-chan's face turned red with anger, his emotional performance reaching its peak. "Boss Hiroshi, we've just met. I had no enmity with you before. I have no reason to bear any ill will towards you." Hiroshi smiled again. "No reason before, but maybe you do now after the meeting in the warehouse." Jerky-chan's face went white all of a sudden. He was scared. He felt that Hiroshi had guessed his thoughts, leaving him at a loss. Seeing his reaction, Hiroshi's face immediately darkened. Exactly. Kiko's ability hadn't been wrong. Jerky-chan wasn't as kind as he seemed. "Speak. Tell me everything." Hiroshi stared expressionlessly at Jerky-chan. "If you confess now, I might consider letting you off." "Boss Hiroshi, I'm really innocent." Jerky-chan pretended to be pitiful. "My family was robbed clean by those thugs. You're like a savior to me. How could I betray you? This is ridiculous." Jerky-chan shouted angrily. "I'm just trying to get some food. I can't go up against them, and I don't want to starve to death. I had no choice but to use this method to survive. Boss Hiroshi, please forgive me this time." Hiroshi's anger burned from his chest into his brain, and he held it in with difficulty, sneering, "Good. You're really something. We're all thinking about how to kill those locust-like thugs, and you're giving them inside information. Your meal was won at the cost of our lives. Kowtowing to the plunderers, betraying your own people. You're not even worthy of being called human." Hiroshi squeezed these words out of his teeth. He had never felt such disgust and the urge to kill someone. It was because of people like Jerky-chan that those thugs were so rampant. "Boss Hiroshi, I'm sorry. Please spare me this time. I really realize my mistake." Jerky-chan wailed, kneeling on the ground and knocking his head repeatedly. He knew very well that if Hiroshi decided to kill him, there would be no way he would survive. "Do you really think you've done wrong?" "No. You're just scared." Hiroshi stared at Jerky-chan, his heart unmoved. If it weren't for Kiko noticing something was wrong earlier, Jerky-chan might have already run to the thugs to boast. How else could he be crying and begging for mercy now? Jerky-chan was terrified by Hiroshi's threatening tone. He shook like a sieve, stammering and pleading, "Boss Hiroshi, as long as you spare my life, I'll do anything you ask." Initially, Hiroshi wanted to let him go and join Jack, but then a thought flashed through his mind. He slowly put down the steel pipe and looked at Jerky-chan, squinting his eyes and saying gently, Chapter 50, Jerky-chan's Role. "I want you to go and inform those bandits that there is a large stockpile of food stored in my farm." Hiroshi spoke slowly, his voice chilling. Jerky-chan was momentarily stunned. Then an ugly smile squeezed onto his face, uglier than crying. Boss Hiroshi, please don't play with me anymore. I really repent. I will absolutely not inform those people. Jerky-chan's voice trembled with fear. He felt that Hiroshi wanted to enjoy the thrill of cat and mouse, so he pleaded desperately. I'm not joking with you, Hiroshi said expressionlessly. I want you to go and inform those people. Otherwise, how can I ambush them? Jerky-chan suddenly realized. He stammered, You want me to lure the enemy? What, you don't want to? Hiroshi's tone turned cold suddenly, his eyes filled with killing intent locked onto Jerky-chan. No, I am willing to atone for my sins. But I'm afraid I won't do well. What if they figure out something is wrong? Jerky-chan's throat felt dry. What Hiroshi asked him to do was to venture deep into the tiger's den, a life-threatening risk. Originally, he wanted to take the safest path, but Hiroshi forced him into the most dangerous situation. Jerky-chan was at his wit's end. Very well, since you're willing, do it tomorrow morning, Hiroshi smiled brightly. If you succeed, I will consider it your redemption. Jerky-chan could only nod silently. He had no choice. If he refused, even if Hiroshi didn't kill him tonight, once this matter leaked out, the other 20-plus people would tear him to shreds. Even his family wouldn't be able to stay in the town. What about tonight? Jerky-chan asked. Tonight, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you, Hiroshi said softly. 30 minutes later, Jerky-chan was dragged back to the farm, his wrists chained and confined in the warehouse. Hiroshi ordered a combatant-class watchdog to guard him. If Jerky-chan showed any signs of resistance or escape, he would be killed immediately. Throughout the night, Hiroshi was very reassured with the watchdog on guard, and he slept very well. But Jerky-chan had a miserable night. Beaten by Hiroshi's steel pipes, he was in intense pain. Coupled with the cold temperature of the warehouse, Hiroshi only gave him a military coat to fend off the cold. The piercing cold made him curl up in a corner of the warehouse like a quail, enduring the occasional sleep interrupted by nightmares. In short, Jerky-chan felt like he had lived through years in just one night, suffering immensely. He had no phone and couldn't tell the time. In the darkness, he felt like he was losing his mind. It wasn't until a ray of daylight shone into the warehouse that he knew his night of torment was finally over. Now, he would rather risk his life to lure the enemy than continue to endure this torture in this icy warehouse. Bang! The warehouse door was pushed open from the outside. Hiroshi walked in, looked at Jerky-chan frozen stiff like a popsicle, and smiled. The time has come. Hiroshi walked over, unlocked the chain from Jerky-chan's wrist, and then took out something like a wristwatch from his pocket, tightly fastening it around Jerky-chan's arm. What's this? Jerky-chan hesitated and asked. The latest technology, a monitoring explosive, Hiroshi smiled. From his pocket, he took out something resembling a car remote control and pointed to the watch on Jerky-chan's arm. I will monitor your conversation with those bandits. If I detect anything suspicious, I will press the remote. Then your arm and half of your chest will be blown away instantly. If you're lucky, you won't feel any pain, and your life will disappear from then on. If you're unlucky, you will experience 15 minutes of excruciating pain from organ failure and excessive bleeding. It also has a tension sensor. If you try to take it off yourself, the moment the belt loosens, Hiroshi gestured with both hands, making an explosion gesture, and smiled. Boom! You'll see fireworks all over the sky, mixed with your flesh and blood. Jerky-chan's face turned pale. Instinctively, he reached out to touch the wristband, but his fingers stopped abruptly about an inch away from the strap. Boss Hiroshi, I truly repent. Do we really need to use such a thing? Jerky-chan was frightened and uneasy, his voice trembling, squeezing out a smile uglier than crying. If something goes wrong with this thing, my life will be in jeopardy. You better pray it doesn't malfunction and don't let anyone touch it. Otherwise, you'll bear all the consequences yourself. Hiroshi smiled, spread his hands, and said, You can go now. Watching Jerky-chan drive away, Kiko walked out from the small building, standing calmly next to Hiroshi. How was it? Hiroshi asked. His color is redder than yesterday, almost approaching black. Kiko pouted, somewhat afraid, and moved slightly behind Hiroshi, whispering, "Big brother, this person, I think he might do something bad to us. I'm very scared of him." Hiroshi looked deeply in the direction Ch41-50 had left, then touched Kiko's head and said, "It's okay. Brother will handle it. Breakfast is ready. Kiko can eat by herself," Hiroshi said softly. "Okay." Kiko was after all a child. She quickly forgot unpleasant things or people, turned around, and ran into the small building, sitting at the dining table to start devouring the breakfast Hiroshi had prepared for her. The quails raised yesterday had already laid several eggs. Hiroshi stewed them with tea leaves and soy sauce, making a small bowl of tea eggs. With millet porridge and meat buns, this breakfast was equally sumptuous. After eating and drinking his fill, taking advantage of Kiko's study time, Hiroshi took out his phone and dialed Jimmy's number. "Hey, Jimmy, notify our people to gather and get ready to move." With Hiroshi's call, the situation in the entire southern city was about to undergo a huge change. And all this started with Ch41-50 as the fuse. Hiroshi entered the system control interface, where the status of all guards and intelligent robots on the farm appeared in his mind. At this moment, among the many green light spots representing monitoring guards, one labeled Patrol Radar 01 had already left the farm range. It was moving fast, and from the transmitted images from its perspective, it showed that it was in the location of the vehicle driven by Ch41-50. At this moment, Ch41-50, who was driving the vehicle in a state of panic, completely unaware that there was a small radar the size of a thumb quietly hanging at the rear of the vehicle. Unlike ordinary radars, it had a small propeller on top and 6 metal joints below, gripping the antenna at the rear of the vehicle tightly, transmitting a large amount of footage back to Hiroshi's mind. The patrol-level radar is tracking the target, and everything is normal. The target's route has not deviated,